Hello, dear Jehan Malim. Today, our team is going to speak about the Mayas, the ancient civilizations of America. Although discovery of the America occurred through Columbus' visit in 1492, early civilizations had existed even before that historic date in that territory. Those civilizations had continued their existence through developing agricultural industries. Different civilizations inhabited in different parts of the continent over the years. Three of those civilizations were considered as major groups who resided along current Mexico and Central America region. These are Aztecs, Incas, and Maya. Our presentation is going to cover distinct characteristics of Maya, their economy, governance, military, culture, and sport. First of all, the Maya have sustained their existence for 1,000 years and extended over modern Guatemala, El Salvador, so-called Mesoamerica region. Despite presence of controversial approach from periods that Maya had existed, joint opinion in academic arena claims that history of Maya had been formed through these three periods. According to historians, the first era encompassed the period from 3000 BC to AD 317, while the subsequent period, which also called as Classic period, continued between AD 317 and 900. The last phase of Maya existence is estimated to be ended up through Spanish conquest in 1697 AD. The Maya, so-called the lost civilizations, had been popular in terms of civilization-standing achievement in the area of arts, language, inscriptions, and so on. Many historians and scientists refer to the Classic period as the peak stage of Maya's development. Foundation of many cities and their agricultural and cultural development occurring during that time frame. Tikal and Calakmul were the most flourishing cities at that time, thus establishment of fascinating monuments has taken place in the area of those cities. In general, the largest cities were considered as the capital of great kingdoms. Numerous temples and palaces symbolized the wealth of cities as more establishments showed how prosperous the cities were. The most known monumental architecture were pyramids which had been built in their religious centers. Another unique construction was the carved stone slabs which demonstrate ruling elite and their ancestors through paintings regarding accomplishments. There were also magnificently decorated palaces that had been established to serve for rulers, and their locations were in the centers of the cities. Wideness of the palace and multiple rooms in terms of layout reminds the ancient Greek design. Temples area also considered as important centers that had been established by Maya in order to organize funeral ceremony. Furthermore, the Maya has also been popular with regard to its agricultural advancement. Archaeological science proves the fact that agricultural infrastructure was perfectly built up as it enabled people to develop their lands regardless of their geographical location. Perfectly excavated canals and drainage systems allowed people to produce their harvest in an efficient way. The Maya also gained popularity for its evolutionary writing system. Although the Maya were not the first inventor of writing systems in Mesoamerica, it's the only scriptural layout that has been comprehensively decoded. The historic indications with respect to Maya inscriptions can be made at San Bartolo, namely in modern-day northern Guatemala. The Maya have used hieroglyphs to write texts, and this writing method has sustained its existence until 17th century. Most of the inscriptions have been reflected on ceramic containers and stone statues. More than 1,000 various symbols have been used in the Maya writing. In the scientific language, the Maya writing scheme is named as logosyllabic system composed of words and syllables which have been complied through harmonic signs. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Agabem Zeynalzadeh, and today I'm going to talk about the economy of Maya civilization. The ancient Maya civilization had an advanced trade system consisting of short, medium, and long trade routes and robust market for a range of goods and materials. The subsistence methodology for people who lived in the Maya region during the Classic period was primarily farming and had been since about 900 BC. People in the rural areas lived in sedentary villages, relying heavily on a combination of domestic maize, beans, squash, and amaranth. Other plants domesticated or exploited by Maya farmers include cacao, avocado, and breadnut. Only a handful of domesticated animals were available to the Maya farmers, including dogs, turkeys, and stingless beasts. During the Classic period, certain artisans, especially those makers of polychrome vases and carved stone monuments, produced their goods specifically for the elites, and their production and styles were controlled by those elites. Other Maya craft workers were independent of direct political control. The Mayans never had a traditional currency which was widely accepted across their region. Instead, like many fledgling civilizations, they simply traded items that were essential to survival. But soon enough, a second breed of money in the form of rare, valuable items such as cacao seeds, salt, and gold became part of the Mayan system, and historians class the goods into two categories: prestige items and sustenance items. Smaller Mayan cities had a free market structures where they openly traded different objects. In larger cities such as Marketplace was well managed and usually controlled and overlooked by local authorities. The Maya engaged in long-distance trade beginning at least as early as 2000 to 1500 BCE, but little is known about its organization. Trade connections are known to have been established between pre-classic Maya and people in Olmec towns and Teotihuacan. By about 1100 BCE, the raw material for goods such as obsidian, jade, marine shell, and magnetite was brought into the urban centers. There were periodic markets established in most of Maya cities. There is no doubt that increasingly sophisticated sailing technology impacted the amount of trade that moved along the Gulf Coast. Trade was moved along the riverine routes, and Gulf Coast communities served as key intermediaries between the highlands and the Piton lowlands. Waterborne commerce was an ancient practice among the Mayas, extending back to the late formative period. By the post-classic they were using sea-going vessels that could carry much heavier loads than a simple canoe. The single most important subsistence item for the Mayan society was maize. Mayans depend heavily on rainfall-based agriculture to grow enough quantities of maize. Other food items were also commonly traded, such as cocoa beans, fish, and other types of seafood, and chili pepper. Fruits such as avocado were also commonly traded between Mayan cities. Mayans created a number of art pieces and handiworks using different precious items such as gold, jade, copper, and obsidian. These items were abundantly found in many Mayan cities. Mayan would excavate them and then get their craftsmen to work on them diligently, working out minutiously crafted items. These items were used by the nobility of Mayan cities and traded to non-Mayan cities as well where the rich elite bought them as origin of status. Other prestige items included turquoise, obsidian, salt, and quetzal feathers. Mayan built long-running causeways called sagbe in order to facilitate trade between cities. Causeways were frequently built between allied cities so that merchants and travelers journeying between them would not to have faced any problem. These causeways were lined between limestone stucco, giving them a white color which made them visible to travelers even at night. So the Maya economy remains one of the civilization's great mysteries.
Hello everyone, my name is Murat Abdullayev and I would like to talk about the governance in Mayan civilization. In ancient Mayan civilization, the ruler was considered as godlike creature, which to some might one unified state. However, some scientists support the idea that the major Maya city remained independent and had its own political power. The various Maya city-states found in modern Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. The range of civilization is prolonged from 1500 BCE to 1500 CE and divided mainly in three parts: pre-classical period, which is from 1500 BCE till 250 BCE; classical period, which arranged from 250 BCE till 900 CE; and the post-classical period, which prolongs from 900 CE till 1530 CE. Periods can differentiate between each other by few characteristics. For example, the classical period can be recognized by the abundance of Maya policies and thriving trade between the Maya policies and non-Maya policies. Also, elites in classical period are considered to be more educated than in another period. But furthermore, the pre-classical period is notable for fewer large policies, but the fundamentals of classic period are developed in this period. The post-classic period is marked by the decline of many large cities, states. Most of them were abandoned and had a very severe drop in their population. What about Mayan politics? It didn't begin from the beginning, like from the kings. It began from the late pre-classic period, around 300 BCE. Men were not the only one who were ruling in the Maya civilization. Women also ruled when the king is away from the for the war or is not in the age of the ruling. Through the Maya era, the Maya stayed in separate policies and didn't unite as one empire. The same can be said for the classical Maya period. The classic period is considered by Kofi Rivilla and Landman to have about 72 major political units. These policies didn't exist simultaneously, only 50 existed together. The 72 policy figure doesn't include the smaller, less political units. Researchers understood that the Maya had two cycles of politics, which included an initial period of rise and fall, and then the rebound time, which was shorter than the first period, but still followed the normal patterns by the cycle and went until the late post-classic period. In Maya civilization, economy consisted of classic three-tiered system. The system consists of elites, middle class, and lower class. Elites are mainly stayed near the temples in the city center, and their houses were built from the stones. The middle class is where the middle class people lived a little bit far away from the city center, but their houses were made from the wattle and daub. The same is for the lower class. They lived but a little bit farther than the middle class. As the middle class was the main producer of goods, the elite class was closely working with the middle class. But another research says that the main producer was the elite class, so they had no contact with the middle class. Also, there is a Kosakowski study on the classic Maya city Motul de San Jose, demonstrate the shifting tendencies of reign among the elite. These changes in the actual geographical boundaries of reign for the elites could also indicate that at some point there could have been independent cities. In the other words, there was no ruling system in some ancient Maya cities. Research also tells us another take on Maya social and economic structure. Kosakowski argues that the elites were not the only segment of the population that has access to high value materials. Also, another fact in the research is that adults of elite class were full bodied, less signs of arthritis, and were taller than the adults from the other classes. That's all from my side, and my classmates will continue.
Maya superstates, Tikal and the massive snake kingdom, Kalakmon, collided and cycled between moments of triumph and disaster for not only themselves but the entire world. Maya warfare was a little different, as there were no draft animals. Maya armies would have to carry all of their own equipment and food. Porters were used, so soldiers wouldn't have to carry everything, but the longer the campaign, the more porters would be needed to carry food. The Maya conquests and campaigns were short, and they usually never traveled more than 2 weeks march. Rather than empires or massive kingdoms, the Maya instead formed hegemonies and political leagues. Each state was technically independent, but a complex system of lords and overlords, dynastic marriages, and intimidation allowed the stronger states to dominate the weaker ones. Uh, Wars were usually conducted by and for the Maya elites, and so they were expected to do most of the fighting. The Maya military was entirely infantry based. Armor wasn't worn for the most of my history, but when it was worn, it was a thick cotton vest stuffed with rock salt. This Kevlar-like vest would have been extremely difficult to slice through. Nobles would have wanted to stand out on the battlefield in order to gain prestige, and so it was common for them to be dressed in brightly colored feathers and drape themselves in many different animal skins. For their weapon, the Maya relied on short spears, usually tipped with chert or flint, but nobles would often have obsidian-tipped weapons. According to the Lacan de Maya, chert point will usually kill, and obsidian point always kills. Along with these spears, swords like Makitil were used along with is a hider wooden shields. For their ranged weapons, the Maya used blowguns, javelins, slings, and a weapon imported from the Mexican highlands, the atlatl or spear thrower. Uh, this powerful weapon could launch large spears that speed up 150 kilometers per hour. That knocks a man off at his feet before killing him. Most of my books were burned, so I have no military manuals, and therefore the exact tactics and strategies they used are lost. But it seems Maya warfare was based on warriors dueling one on one, with the capture of high-value targets such as kings being the primary goal. As the intensity and frequency of warfare increased, defenses were quickly erected around the cities. Cities like Akutega and Tikal would use walls in combination with natural barriers such as swamps and cliff sides. A favorite defensive strategy of Maya war uh, was to surround their cities with concentric walls. Uh, so then um, the Tucan soldiers marched over 1,000 kilometers towards Maya territory, and on the 8th of January 378 they entered Tikal, then a rising power among the Maya cities, and on the very same day the king of Tikal is said to have entered the water. This is a Maya euphemism for death. According to the Michael Coe, until the arrival of fire is born, the Maya remained politically fragmented, uh, each city-state charting its own path. After 378, Maya culture blossomed, alliances were formed between city-states, and great advances in science and technology took place. But Tikal's dominance could not last forever. Directly to its north, a serious contender was taking shape. It was Calakmul, which was another kingdom. As the power of Calakmul grew, so did the ambitions of its snake kings. By installing dynasties in other cities, a net of Calakmul-aligned cities wrapped around Tikal. These two superpowers soon began to try fight. However, they mostly smoothly avoided direct conflict. They fought through a series of proxy wars instead in a Maya-style Cold War. When finally the direct war started, the war ended with Tikal being overrun and its leader found himself in a sacrificial stone at Calakmul. Yeah, that's it for my part. Thanks for listening.
I'm going to talk about Mayan culture. Firstly, architecture and pyramids. Mayans are perhaps most known for their many pyramids, which were built with religious purposes. The most famous pyramid is El Castillo, located in the city of Chichen Itza. It's a temple built to the Maya god Kukulkan. And this pyramid actually represents Mayan calendar. When you add up the steps on all four sides and then add in the top platform as a step, you get 365 steps for each day in a year. In the city-state of El Mirador, La Danta was the largest pyramid out of 3. The city-state Tikal had 6 pyramids. Temple 4 was the tallest pyramid. Apart from the pyramids, the city-states also had palaces for the kings, giant ball courts where they played games, and also an observatory in Chichen Itza, which reflects their astronomical practices. Now I would like to talk about religion. The Maya were polytheistic. They believed in many gods. The most important god was Itzamna, who was a god of fire and who was believed to be the creator of the earth. Another important god was Kukulkan. Chak was known as the god of rain and lightning. Wolantzakap was the god of storms, wind, and fire. To honor their gods, the Maya had rituals of human and animal sacrifices and bloodletting. The Maya believed that human blood was needed to sustain their gods. And sacrifices were done in 3 methods. The first one was through decapitation. Second was removing the heart of a living person. And the third was to throw a living person into a natural well as an offering to the gods. Bloodletting, on the other hand, did not end in death. In bloodletting, people would use a stingray spine or sharp stone to prick or cut themselves. The gods demanded blood because of the initial creation where the gods spilled their blood in order to give life to the humanity. The Mayas believed in animism, which is the belief that all objects, creatures, possess a distinct spiritual essence or soul. Mayas believed that time and the creation of humans are cyclical. So when a Maya died, it was believed that that person had moved on to begin a new cycle of life. The Maya believed in afterlife, where most people had to go through a dark underworld. The only people who started out afterlife in heaven were women who died in childbirth and people who were sacrificed to the gods. Now I would like to talk about education. There wasn't much emphasis on formal education. Children were often educated by their family members in religion, mythology, and general art of life. Formal education was only available to the royals. The Mayans had a fully developed writing system and they used hieroglyphic scripts to convey information. The basic unit of this Mayan hieroglyph text was a glyph block which transcribed a word or phrase. Now I'm moving on to talk about astronomy. Mayans closely observed the movements of the celestial objects and they also developed eclipse tables along with other astronomical calculations, although this was mainly done for the religious purposes. Mayans had also created accurately yearly calendars. They had 2 kinds of calendars. One was religious and the other one was solar calendar. The solar calendar had 18 months of 20 days each, and there were also 5 extra unlucky days in the 19th month to get to the total of 365 days in a year. And the religious calendar was a 260-day calendar. This calendar has 2 cycles, a 20-day cycle and a 13-day cycle. Each day has a name and a number. The Mayans also had a number system consisting of shells, dots, and lines. Dots and lines were used to represent numerals. The Maya used a number system with the base number of 20, which allowed them to write very large numbers. Now, finally, I would like to talk about the artifacts. The Maya of the classic period developed a sophisticated artistic tradition, producing sculpted stone, painted ceramics, clay figurines, and screenfold bark books of drawings and hieroglyphic writing. Maya ceramic artists were highly educated people of the elite. They used slip paint, a mixture of finely ground pigment, clay, and water to decorate their pottery with images of rituals, myths, geometric motifs, and hieroglyphs. Ceramics were used as tableware, currency, symbols of status, and as offerings to the gods. Clay pots were also made for cooking and storing food. That was all I had to share about the culture of the Mayan civilization. Now Sakina will continue to talk about the sports.
Mayans had a variety of Mayan sports for entertainment and leisure time. The most famous of all Mayan sports was, of course, the Mayan ball game, which had a ritualistic status, and large ball courts were built specifically for this game. But they also played various other kinds of games, such as Tlachli, Hayalai, and board games like Pool and Ptoli. The most popular of all Mayan sports was the Mayan ball game, which was played in the Mesoamerican religion from about 1400 BC. The game had various variations over different places and rules. The common form of this game consisted of players striking the ball, which was made of solid rubber, with their hips. In some other variations, they were also allowed the use of forearms, rackets, or bats. A lot of these ball games were accompanied with grand events, which sometimes even included the ritual of human sacrifice. Winners of the game were treated as heroes and given a great feast. The penalty for losing a game was unusually harsh. The leader of the team who lost the game was sometimes killed. This fit in with the Mayan belief that human sacrifice was necessary for the continued success of the people's agriculture, trade, and overall health. Mayans built special ball courts where the ball game was played. These ball courts had varying sizes and also different in the shape. One of the largest ball courts was located in the Mayan city of Chichen Itza. At each end, there was a raised temple area which could be used for different kinds of rituals. Another important Mayan sport was called Tlachtli, which involved keeping a grapefruit-sized rubber ball in air with the use of thighs, hips, and chest. The game was also known by various other names, such as Pokatok, Pete's, Tlacho, and Ulama. In some later variations of the game, the goal became knocking the ball through hoop-like stone bricks, which were hanging downward from a wall in the center of the court. Next is High Ally. This game is played between two players. One of them is the server, who has a wicker basket tied to the right hand. He hurls the hard rubber ball against the granite wall. After hitting against the wall, the ball has to land in the marked zone. The opponent is then supposed to catch the ball in single motion and hurl it again. A point can be scored in two ways, either if the player fails to return the serve or is not able to hurl it into the marked zone. The players often wear helmets to protect themselves from the high-speed ball. Among the Mayan board games, Bull is particularly remarkable. This is a dice game which involves the use of grains and mathematical calculations. The game can be played by two individuals as well as two teams. It is considered a war game because the ultimate objective is to capture and kill the playing pieces of the opposition. Equal playing space is reserved for the two players using rods placed parallel to each other. Ptoli was another Mayan game. The rules of this game involved moving 6 game pieces along different squares on a board. The end goal was to get all the pieces from the starting square to the ending square before the opponent. 5 or 6 spin pieces were generally used as dice. This game involved heavy betting, and all sorts of items such as gold endowments, blankets, precious stones, and other material possessions were used for betting. In extreme cases, the players could even bet their homes. To conclude, the Mayan people were able to build a historic civilization as a result of their complex government system, religious practices, and agricultural exploits. The Mayans were therefore able to survive for hundreds of years, which they built great architectural sites and built great cities. That was all. Thank you.